Welcome, everyone. It's a real pleasure to see so many of you coming here today to join us for the final session in our Climate Action Summit, which I hope you've been able to tune into some of our online programming. We're really thrilled with how it's gone and very much looking forward to a strong finish. My name is Steve Kenzie. I'm the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network UK. I deserve no credit for any of this production. My fantastic team have pulled it all together and the whole summit. And as I say, we're really thrilled with how it's gone and thrilled to see you all. We're thrilled to be in this spectacular room. And so a huge thanks to Dan and all of the Foresight Group team for organizing and being so hospitable. And let me remind you now to not rush off afterwards. If you haven't noticed all the glasses at the back, they are for you. So it'd be really our pleasure to join you for a drink after everything wraps up. I don't recognize all of you, which I suppose is normal, but that suggests that you might not all be familiar with UN Global Compact. So apologies to those of you that are. Just a few words. Global Compact is the largest corporate sustainability initiative globally, and we're also largest, I'm going to say the largest social corporate responsibility network here in the UK. We've got over 800 participants in our network, mostly companies. All have committed to 10 universal principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. Our principles are drawn from UN treaties, and that makes, when I say they're universal, there's some credibility to that. It's not just marketing hyperbole. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights has been ratified around the world, and that's what we base our human rights principles on. And our environment principles come from the Rio Earth Summit Charter, again, ratified by almost every country in the world. So this provides a rock solid foundation upon which companies can create their own sustainability strategies or supplier codes of conduct. So we really want to urge you to take a look. It's not just about that commitment, although it's important. We also offer a huge amount of support to the companies that are participating in our initiative to help them fulfill the commitments that they've made. So again, if you're watching online, there's probably something in the chat box right now with links for you to take a look, and I'd really encourage you to do so. Okay. Moving on. It is my real pleasure to introduce Dan Wells. Dan is a partner here at Foresight Group. He's currently the co-lead fund manager of Foresight's flagship sustainable infrastructure fund, representing a capital pool of around 600 million euros and growing. The fund's investment strategy encompasses new energy infrastructure, broadly including renewables, flexible technologies such as battery storage, and future grid assets in Europe, Australia, and the US. He also previously established Foresight's sustainable land and food team to build strategies in forestry, regenerative agriculture, and future forms of sustainable food production. So he's perfectly placed to listen to both sides of this debate fairly and objectively. And so with that, it is my pleasure to hand over to Dan. He's going to introduce our panelists and get the fight started.
Thanks very much, Steve. Thank you also to the UNGC for working with us on this and for partnering with us and giving Foresight the chance to host this event, which we're delighted to be doing. And thank you all for coming, making the effort to come here today. And I really hope we can have some fun with this debate. Foresight Group is a UK-listed infrastructure and private equity manager. We manage about £12 billion of assets. And as Steve has already alluded to, we are sustainability focused and we invest into both technology, principally energy transition, but also nature-based solutions into forests and working on investment strategies in soils and potentially in the future, the oceans as well. So we're here to talk about technology and nature. I think we all recognize that nature provides kind of everything we need to exist. And it does that, it just does it day after day, really just gets on with it. But we often ignore it, we degrade it, and we sometimes forget that by protecting nature, we are obviously protecting ourselves. But also technology has a huge role to play over the last few years, probably the single biggest story in sustainability, the good news story, has been the reduction in cost in renewable energy technology, which has got to the point now. So before the Ukraine invasion, probably 2/3 of the world's population lived in an area where the cheapest form of energy was an electron from a wind or a solar park. And now today it's probably everywhere, and that's creating all these kind of cascade effects throughout the world economy, which is great to see. So technology and nature is an important question. It's also a pointed question because it's something that people feel strongly about. And I think the reason for that is that it kind of goes to the heart of how we think about ourselves as environmentalists and people concerned about things like climate change. I'm going to use a metaphor here. There's a fantastic book by Charles Mann called The Wizard and the Prophet, which essentially talks about different people in the environmental movement either being wizards who back technology or prophets who are focused on nature. Wizards tend to focus on and talk about things like market forces and international trade and growth is good. So someone like Elon Musk is a kind of classic wizard. The prophets, on the other hand, focus on working within the natural limits of the world, respecting those natural limits, not always thinking that growth is necessarily on its own a good thing, more focus on a circular economy. There's debate within wizards and prophets as well. We might touch on some of those in the discussion today. I'll just pick on one, for example. In the motion we're discussing, which is quite a long and specific motion, we talk about novel technologies. Within the wizard community, there is a raging debate about whether we need new technology. So people like Bill Gates kind of going down that route, and others who say, we have all the technology we need, we just need to roll it out and deploy it at scale. So I think the point being here that the kind of the differences we're talking about is not just how to address climate change, it's how we think of ourselves as identities. Are we a wizard or are we a prophet? So the motion today, I'll just read it out, is green technologies cannot substitute for nature in supporting life on Earth. Therefore, this House believes that in our efforts to tackle climate change, investments in the protection and restoration of nature must be prioritised over the development of novel technologies. So in essence, nature versus technology, but there's a few nuances kind of buried within that motion that we might dig into a bit. Really excited to introduce the two teams today. Speaking for the motion, we have the nature crew, or Team Profit, to my right over here. We've got Claire Brady, who is Head of Strategy and Innovation at Bioregional. Mathew Frith, who is Director of Policy and Research at the London Wildlife Trust. We have Lola Bushnell, who is a Sustainable Future Strategist at Arup. And to my left are the wizards, the tech billionaires over here. Starting from my left, we have Stuart Hayward-Higham, who is a Technical Development Director at Suez. Mattie Yeta, who is Chief Sustainability Officer at CGI, and Francisca Sassetti, Responsible Sourcing Consultant at Sedex. So welcome to you all. I think the key here is to try and have fun. I'm going to try and impose some kind of order on proceedings. In terms of then the format and how we're going to run it, we're going to have an initial audience vote, and we'll bring up a slide in a second so you can get a QR code so you can vote on Slido. There's going to be first and second speakers from each team. We're then going to have Q&A, and you can submit questions on Slido as well. Then a final audience vote with some final reflections from the debaters about kind of what everyone's thought about the discussion today. Just in terms of other housekeeping, I do have kindly, courtesy of my colleague Henry Morgan, I have a gavel to keep some order. Now, this is a little bit left field, but this is also a metaphor. This is a whittled wood spoon of nature, and this is a digital camera of technology. So when I'm whacking it, it's a good method. That's not to say I'm necessarily on the nature side, but anyway, so I'll try and impose some order. So I think now we're going to the initial audience vote. So you should be able to vote on that.
Oh, that would have been a really good idea.
So I think only I can see the results. Is that right? Yeah, okay. So the results are coming in at the minute. They're still bouncing around a bit. We have at the minute, we do have an emerging initial winner, which is nature-based solutions at 59% and green technologies at 41%.
Oh.
So that means that Team Wizard has a bit of work to do there, but I'm sure you're up to the task. So we're going to kick off with first speaker, and is that Claire, you from the nature team? Claire, over to you in that case.
Thank you. So today we've been asked to debate whether green technologies can substitute nature in supporting life on Earth, and therefore whether we should focus our efforts in tackling climate change by investing in the protection and restoration of nature, or rely on human ingenuity and tech to save the day. I argue that we have no other choice than to invest in nature. There is, to me at least, a certain arrogance in thinking that we can invent a technological solution to every aspect of the complex natural system that provides the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat. And if we take this line of thinking to its natural conclusion, then where does it lead us? I ask you now to imagine a world where there are no longer any natural systems left, and that everything we need to sustain life is now generated solely by technology. Is it possible? And would you even want to live in that kind of future? Even the film The Martian, about colonizing Mars, didn't opt for a solely tech vision of the future. It still had crops being grown from seed. You see, the really amazing thing about nature is that it is by far the most complex, interconnected, and when you really think about it, mind-blowing system that sustains all life on Earth. And as a human race, I would suggest that we've barely begun to scratch the surface of understanding how it works and its full potential to sustain life. And that is why I'm arguing that in our efforts to tackle climate change, we have to go all in on nature-based solutions. Estimates suggest that nature-based solutions can provide 37% of the mitigation needed until 2030 to achieve the targets of the Paris Agreement. By opting for tech, are we really saying we don't need this and that we can engineer our way to a 1.5-degree future without the solutions that nature can provide? So when we talk about nature-based solutions, it's important to help bring to life what we really mean in practice. So I'm going to talk through two examples that help understand how this is a system and that these system-based solutions can not only help us address climate change, but they also do a whole lot more. Now, many people make the immediate connection between climate change, reducing emissions, and protecting forests. But I'm going to focus in on wetlands and explore two different nature-based solutions. So first, mangroves. In the Bay of Assassins on the southwest coast of Madagascar, mangroves are life. Not only do they protect local communities from storm surges and sea level rise, but they also provide food to eat, timber for houses, and jobs for local residents. But because of all these conflicting uses, along with other threats, mangroves are being lost to deforestation, and they're degrading at an alarming rate. When we take a global view of their value, the picture becomes even more complex. Because of their extraordinary capacity to sequester carbon, sometimes up to 4 times per unit area more than terrestrial forests, they've got real value on an international carbon market. But not only do they store vast amounts of carbon in their root systems, they also save us about $65 billion a year in avoided losses from storms, from floods, as they act as coastal defences and they reduce the wave impact. Now, from an environmental justice perspective, we absolutely must find a way to ensure that the value can be realised and transferred to the people whose livelihoods depend on the exploitation of mangroves. And to do this effectively, we need to have the right incentives in place for sustainable, locally led management. Now, an example of this is Blue Ventures. It's a project that was one of the first fully verified blue carbon mangrove conservation projects. And this takes a systems approach. So not only is it protecting and promoting reforestation and creating a protected area, but it's improving regulations to help ensure long-term sustainable use. But another really critical element is it's working with local women's community groups and young people. Women are trained to participate in carbon monitoring as well as reforestation. And through this whole system approach, it means the project is generating jobs for the local community that are not based on exploiting the mangroves. And through the youth programme, it's ensuring that everybody understands the long-term importance of mangroves for future generations. Moving on from mangroves, another area I want to talk about is peatlands. Did you know that more than 160 countries in the world have peatlands? It's pretty astounding. Now, they only cover 3% of our global land surface, but they're estimated to store 30% of the world's soil carbon. That's twice as much as the world's forests. Now, that's pretty good for a bit of bogland, in my opinion. They're also amazing ecosystems. They host rare and unique biodiversity. They regulate water supply and water quality. They cool our atmosphere, they prevent floods and droughts, and they also produce food and biomass to help sustain local economies. Now, already about 15% of the world's peatlands have been drained, and this is only 0.4% of global land surface. They're responsible for 1.3 gigatons of CO2 emissions. That's nearly 6% of global anthropogenic CO2 emissions. So protecting them is absolutely vital. Intact peatlands need to be protected, keep the carbon locked where it belongs, wet, in the ground. We also need to restore degraded peatlands. We need to halt the process of carbon being released into our atmosphere. Now, this might be a fairly emerging area of work, but there's lots of growing recognition that peatland restoration is economically beneficial and an efficient way of providing a nature-based solution to not just climate change, but biodiversity loss. So hopefully through just these two examples, I've been able to persuade you of not only just how vital these natural systems are for addressing climate change, but of the wider benefits that restoring and protecting these natural systems can bring. I mean, let's be honest, nature is already the singularly most sophisticated system for processing greenhouse gases that we know of. And let's be honest, it's had a pretty good head start on human ingenuity for solving this challenge. So I ask you, are we not just being a little bit foolish if we think in the next few years we can invent our way into something better than nature?
Thank you, Claire. That was a fantastic start, very passionate, and a great and powerful description of the interconnected, interdependent nature of the world. And I love the deep dive there into wetlands, so thank you for that. And that's spot on time as well. Just a point of admin, what I'm going to do now actually is when you have 30 seconds left, I'm going to give a couple of knocks on the gavel, basically. Right, so we have our first wizard. So Mattie, over to you.
Thank you. This house believes that we must invest in novel technologies to achieve the sustainable outcomes we need to achieve. According to the Global Warming Index, which is the index developed by the Oxford University and the UNFCCC, human-induced emissions contribute to 1.2 degrees to 1.8 degrees emissions by 2050, and nature accounts for 0.5% of that. The rate at which human-induced emissions are being produced, which is as a result of industrializations and technologies, need to be matched by the level of reductions in order to achieve net zero, and in a way that we can realize immediate benefits. According to the World Economic Forum, technology can reduce 20% of emissions in 3 sectors alone: energy, materials, and mobility. In addition to this, a further 30% reductions can be realized in several other sectors, in addition to enhancing nature. For example, peatlands have been spoken about. I'm really proud to be working for an organization such as CGI that is responsible for developing novel technologies that are monitoring damaged peatlands in Indonesia. As my colleague highlighted, peatlands are a major contributor to global emissions. In Indonesia, we are monitoring peatlands, managing their health, as well as providing information to policymakers and governments so that peatlands could be restored at a rate that is far much quicker than the Indonesian government is able to achieve just by investing in nature. Technology can also reduce emissions within its own sector by 14%. For example, from software development, green code, green software algorithms are going to be responsible for 14% of emissions by 2030. We need to develop the innovations, the technologies, and the algorithms needed to help personnel understand the impact of all of the software that is running in our mobile phones, our laptops, our data centers, because those alone will increase our emissions by 14%. Let us not forget about the capabilities of technologies to capture carbon. It is estimated that carbon capture technologies can capture emissions by 90% at a rate far much quicker than nature-based solutions in industries such as plants industries. In addition to that, they can convert CO2 emissions to enable sustainable development of the manufacturing and the building sectors. So that alone gives you an insight into the capabilities of technologies to not just capture carbon at a rate far much quicker than nature, but also gives us the opportunities to invent and use the CO2 being captured in innovative ways to drive sustainable outcomes in industries that are largely responsible for producing large amounts of emissions. Therefore, technology is not only an enabler, it is essential. It is critical that we invest in the technologies to drive the accelerated reductions needed by 2030. In the technology sector, as I highlighted, 14% of those emissions could be reduced by 2030 as a result of technology alone. And those are the reductions needed to achieve the 1.5 degrees needed. So this House rests the motion, and I look forward to hearing further counter arguments from my nature colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mattie. An excellent retort there. And as you would expect from the Wizard team, very, very data-driven. Some of the messages there coming through are just the effectiveness of technology at scale, and also using technology to support nature. So maybe that's one for Team Profit to have a think about, is how can you kind of push back on that? The sort of message there being that nature can't do it on its own, and it needs technology. Just to remind you, feel free to start submitting questions on Slido. There is a few coming through already. There's a few sort of along the lines of, don't we need both? Okay, I'm just going to remind everyone of the motion here, which is about, the motion here is essentially to prioritize nature over tech. So what I want, so feel free to ask partisan questions, if you know what I mean there. Okay, right. So we're going to go back to Team Profit, and Mathew, over to you as a second speaker.
Thank you, Dan. Some of you may have heard a report released today that wildlife populations across the world have plunged by an average of 69% in the last 50 years. We are increasingly aware of entering the 6th extinction event, the single worrying feature, what many now call the Anthropocene. That's pretty amazing for one supposedly smart ape compared to what an interstellar asteroid did 60 million years ago. I'm going to offer a London perspective on these matters. London, perhaps surprisingly, is almost 50% green and blue, and about 20% of the city's land is of importance for nature. Over 15,000 species of fauna, flora, and fungi have been recorded in the capital. But despite that, we are in a stark nature crisis. At a national level, 15% of our species are in danger of going extinct. And in 2019, the last time this was assessed, in terms of our biodiversity intactness, the UK was rated 189th out of 218 countries across the world. Technologies for agriculture, industry, and the trappings of a modern society that many benefit from have all contributed to the depletion of our nature and the ecological resilience upon which our lives depend. Will they continue to do so? And even after 100 years of legislation and conservation practice in Britain, we have been collectively unable to prevent the assault on our nature and thereby exacerbating our vulnerability to the impacts of climate change. My experience suggests that without a green, nature-friendly city, we will be unable to make London a comfortable or safe place in which to live, work or play. Nature-based solutions are critical as the city grows and help us adapt to an increasingly challenging and unstable climate. Nature and the climate crises are intertwined. Impacts of a changing climate are becoming increasingly visible to those of us in London, and they are no longer a distant threat in terms of time and space. I'm sure you'll be aware of the wildfires that we experienced earlier this summer, and it was the busiest day for the London, it was the busiest July for the London Fire Brigade since the bombings of 1944, and there were exceptionally high demands on water. The proximity and experience has led to growing recognition of the role of nature in helping the city to adapt to these climatic changes and making it more resilient to extreme weather events. And natural capital accounting has begun to assess the scale of opportunities to bring about step changes in nature-based solutions. In 2015, a study of London's trees and woodlands, the city's urban forest, showed that they contribute about £133 million worth of benefits annually, storing 2.4 million tonnes of carbon and basically preventing water runoff of 3.4 million cubic metres per year, which is about 1,365 Olympic swimming pools with a value of about £1.5 million. In 2017, a study of public open green spaces in London showed they provided an annual worth of 5 billion worth of benefits, much of which is related to carbon and climate change adaptation. £10 million worth of carbon is stored in London's park soils, £8 million of carbon is stored in parks trees. And the overall contribution of London's green spaces reduces the urban heat temperatures by 2 degrees in a summer. A report this year also went on to the importance of the value of urban wetlands, touching on my colleague's point earlier. If sustainable urban drainage systems, rain gardens, etc., swales and streets, parks, housing estates were incorporated into all new developments in England, the savings due to reduction in flood damage alone are estimated at over £3 billion. These give some real world value to the work that has been undertaken by environmental organisations, local communities and authorities over decades on a plethora of work to restore and enhance the natural assets of London. Firstly, they've been renaturalising our rivers and streams, which were straitjacketed by the technologies of the 20th century in concrete and steel. A nature-based approach is now adopting to slow those waters down at times of high flow, recreating the original floodplains where space permits. 33 kilometres of rivers and streams have been restored and renaturalised since 2010. We need to create new wetlands. We've had the reimagination of the reservoirs at the London Wetland Centre in Barnes, Woodbury Wetlands in Stoke Newington and the Walthamstow Wetlands in the Lee Valley. There's been a whole load of programmes to depave streets, depave gardens, depave schools, installation of rain gardens in housing estates and SUDs across many London streets and neighbourhoods. Thirdly, we need to increase the canopy cover of London. We have 430,000 trees have been planted since 2016, but there is now afforestation starting at a grand scale, such as Enfield Chase and Trent Park up in Enfield, and also at the Thames Chase over in East London, Havering, Barking and Dagenham. And there is a growing reach of community-based tree planting in parks and housing estates. And fourthly, but not necessarily finally, there is the growing integration of nature and building design, green infrastructure to address nature and climate change. So there's been a renaissance of green roofs since 1999, 167 hectares installed since 2009, 2019. The issue I really want to finish on is that most of the technologies aimed at mitigating or adapting to climate change are designed by institutions and delivered through commercial transactions. We are but customers if we choose to be. Nature-based solutions are delivered by large numbers of stakeholders, often grassroots, enabling people to be involved, to learn about nature, to learn about climate, and to take actions of their own. Organisations like ours help to skill people in the climate crisis and working to use nature-based solutions to adapt their lives to the crises that are coming. Thank you.
Mathew, thank you very much for that. That was a stinging indictment of the destruction that we are wreaking upon nature. It also a reminder of the value that nature provides in its kind of many forms. And also, as someone who works and lives near London, I'm proud to hear everything we're doing in London around that. So that's great to hear. So thank you for that, Mathew. The questions are coming in thick and fast now, which is fantastic. So keep sending them in, because we will then ask those after the next speaker. So our next speaker is Francisca, and this is now handing back again to the team of wizards.
Thank you so much. So I guess I like to start to say, don't be fooled by the corporate blazer. If I were a wizard, I would probably be someone like Hermione Granger or like a Draco Malfoy. And because I'm arguing for the investment in novel technologies, green technologies, not because of the eccentricity or because of tech billionaires. I'm arguing for my future, for my generation's future, and for the beautiful and essential life on Earth that natural-based solutions just cannot alone address. And I guess a small example is where I grew up in rural countryside Portugal. My parents working in agriculture. I always felt like very connected to nature. But then as the years went by, I realized how the land that kept us giving us so much was becoming more drier. The climate events were becoming consistently more aggravated and extreme. And my parents started to struggle. And the beautiful ecosystems that they protected through their work as well, and in our beautiful town, started to get lost as well. And so I think I lost some faith in nature in that sense. And then we started to realize, actually, through some of these technologies, we could do irrigation in a way that was more efficient, save water without taking it from the local population and the people who relied on it. And then we could also preserve some of the species, and they started coming back again. And we started to reintroduce some of those endangered species into that beautiful land. If you ever visit, it's near Lisbon. This is to say that I don't believe that technology, the way it's been done and invested so far, will solve the crisis. But the same way that we have the first car that was ever made was completely unsustainable. If you look at that thing, probably, why would we even want to be breathing the same air? We now have electric cars. We now have more sustainable fuels. So when we invest in technology and we give opportunities for technology to be better, to serve our needs, but also to minimize some of these impacts, maximize the potential for good, it can also make things more efficient. It can democratize things for everyone. It can also just give us new opportunities and solve big problems such as logistics, getting from point A to B, or mapping entire communities on a map that before we didn't have, right? So it gives us a lot of opportunities. And I guess that's what I'm arguing here today. We need to keep investing because we are getting there. And so just to rebut a couple of things that have been said, they blame technology for the damage that we have done, but it wasn't technology, it was us. And through what I want to say in this is I want to build on what Mattie brilliantly said, which is technology is an enabler. It is a tool. That would be my first point. And I'll get to that. Also, so let's not shift the blame. Let's not shoot the messenger, but let's look at who is using the technology, how it is used. Because there's been greediness in how technology and business have grown without care, but now we're starting to care about it. So what we're going to do, and something actually we're talking about is it just going to be done by natural-based solutions, carbon offsetting schemes? No, it is not. And the years some of these schemes and these solutions will take to actually get some traction back, I don't think I quite believe that in 2025 we could have that 30% back, because there needs to be an incredible amount of buy-in that we just don't have. Because there's immediate needs. People are starving, people have families, business has to continue. My parents need to bring food to my other siblings, So we can't just stop everything. That's just not realistic. And technology is the only option I think we have. Continue to invest in these technologies. So going back to my first point, technology is an enabler, as Mattie explained. It is a tool. It amplifies our intentions and our capabilities and capacities. If I build a great technology to feed millions of people, to restore ecosystems that can maximize energy and efficiency and make sure we don't have to keep extracting, or that we can extract more renewable energy, I'm I'm using it for a good purpose, right? But if I also use technology in a way that is just for my own greediness and for what I believe is my rightful way to live, or to do harm to others, I can also do that, right? So, but why we blame technology? We don't blame and hold accountable the people that use it and produce it. So that's one thing. And so in this, I guess I agree, which is there's lacks regulation in how technologies are developed, and also assessing the impacts of said technologies before they even develop. And so when I say I'm a Hermione Granger and not a Draco Malfoy, it's because I believe everything needs to be centered on the needs of people, communities, and our key stakeholder here, the environment as well, and our planet. So that's the first thing. The second thing is urgency. A lot of this, as I touched already on this point, some of these nature interventions, I don't think it's going to get us there on time. If they would, I think I would believe them. But so technology, as it has helped us in all of the biggest crises that humanity has faced, is the most cost-efficient, but also efficient solution to helping us address some of these bigger challenges around energy, around the carbon capture, for example. How long is it going to take to fill this planet with trees to make sure that we absorb carbon? Whilst you can't even plant trees, and there's a lot of criticism around some of this research, because carbon offsetting, for example, offsetting and planting trees in some parts of the earth will actually have the opposite effect, because trees are darker, they will absorb light, they will increase warmth as well in some of those regions. So it's not a solution to everything, but I do understand in some way they are free. I guess the urgency is we need to be acting right now so that we can already, as we are past of the point of no return, this is a time where some of these technologies, they are in development, there are being some really positive changes, as Mattie had exemplified, and I'm sure Stuart will also illustrate on. They're already producing some really great results. We need to scale them, but we need to keep investing. This is not time to back down. Otherwise, what we've done, it will be completely irreversible, and there'll be no future for me and the people who come after me. And the third thing is around the holistic approaches. Natural-based approaches can leave people behind. It will marginalize communities and people. And I know this sounds quite an statement, but think about it. The way that technology can help us is to maximize and bring positive solutions to not only help the environment around us, but also the communities that those people are affected by climate disasters. So if we were to produce, as we are already, producing technologies can not only can address both big challenges, right? So the social impacts and the social challenges around. Sorry, that's my own alarm. I'm so sorry.
I'm behind. Yeah, okay.
I have 30 more seconds just to wrap up. This to say that the planet and people that are together. If there's no planet, if there's no people to live on the planet, what is the point of the efforts that we're doing? And so through technology, we can also ensure that those who are affected by climate disasters and climate disasters, communities suffering from extreme droughts like in Portugal, other parts of the world, or flooding, that not only we protect them, when we protect the ecosystems around them as well, because we thrive together as we have done. And nature's way of self-regulating is through, don't forget, death, disease, and famine. Are we going to impose the law of the strongest for us to survive? Because then only the rich and the tech millionaires will, which is not what we argued for. Thanks.
Thank you, Francisca. That was absolutely fantastic. Again, that was passionate. There was some great rebutting going on there, and I love the wizarding references. So I mentioned to my 11-year-old this morning that we were talking about this debate this morning. And of course, like all 11-year-old boys, he instantly knew the answer, and he said, "Oh, it's just like Charles Darwin and his cousin, isn't it?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And apparently, Charles Darwin's cousin, who invented the dog whistle, according to my 11-year-old, was very much into technology, and he had an ongoing row with Charles Darwin about whether nature or technology would basically be the future. Charles Darwin obviously being the technologist. So there we go. Right, we have got lots of questions. This is brilliant, and I've been trying to filter them. The really good thing is that these guys can't see the questions as well, so I'm just going to start reading them out. And we'll do this until about just before 4:15, I think. So what I would do is I think some of these questions probably could go to both teams, but most of them look like they can go to one. So I'm going to start with nature-based solutions. There is a question here to Team Nature around the yield of nature-based solutions. So how can we invest in nature-based solutions when they may not always yield what's expected? So I think the question there is around, so it's referencing forest fires. So it's around things like the permanence of carbon removal. Does anyone want to take that on at all from Team Profit?
My view is we have already so ripped apart our ecological resilience. Nature-based solutions will take some time because the technology of society has already pulled a lot of the planet apart. But if we don't invest in nature, as we will be arguing, we will not have a planet fit to live on. And I think that, yes, there is some issue about that. Nature-based solutions are not just starting from tomorrow. They've been going on for the last 30 years. We just haven't called them that. And so those yields are always going to be subject to change because we're in an unstable climate. And that will also apply to technology.
I think it's also slightly missing the point of the fact that technology is going to create a solution for one very narrowly defined problem. It may actually have a hell of a lot of unintended consequences. So the massive explosion in EV cars, yes, that's great, taking off combustible engines. We don't want the horrible pollutants in our air, but actually do we have enough lithium, and what's the implications for where that lithium is? So we sometimes need to think in systems, and I think we struggle as humans. So we want to be able to have a very clearly, narrowly defined, easily measurable, put a number against it, and then we can stop the mental effort required to understand. And I think with nature-based solutions, it forces us to remember we are part of a much bigger system. We do not fully understand it. We probably never will, but we have no choice but to try to invest and support that. It absolutely is required to do that. So even if we can't put the value on it in exactly the way that you want, there will be other ways of valuing the impact of that nature-based solution. And so I think perhaps trying to understand that, and I think we missed out on some of the debate earlier that was happening around that today, this morning, in terms of how we actually find a better way for humans to sort of almost put numbers against the value of this, because we struggle otherwise to invest in it in the way that we need to.
Thank you, Claire and Matthew there. I'm going to ask a follow-up, actually, on that same sort of topic, which is around removal, measurement, verification and registry. This is the question from Gareth Owen. With peatlands and blue carbon, there seems to be issues with removal, measurement, verification and registry. Do we need technology to hit short-term targets? And I think there's references there to sort of continued challenges over measuring things like kelp and its ability to capture carbon. Any comments from the nature team there at all?
So when we're placing this in the carbon credits market, of course we need that verification. And we do need technology to understand it. That's fundamental. We have such poor knowledge of the functioning of our natural systems. That's a pretty narrow part of the conversation, though, because we need to heal our system functioning in the first place. So yes, our verification is improving, and it will need to continue to improve. Just as, the verification for carbon credits for, say, bioenergy and carbon capture and storage. So we're seeing old growth forests being cut down. And going into bioenergy carbon capture solutions, and getting that money that was directed toward addressing the climate crisis. Meanwhile, the embodied carbon of that is on top of the lost carbon removal from those old growth forests is declining. So I think it goes on both sides, but we know that nature sequesters carbon. We don't know the whole life cycle analysis of these technologies.
Thank you, Lola. That's brilliant. And that point about restoring and healing nature brings me neatly onto a question for the wizards, and I love this question. Technology cannot restore an extinct species, Clearly, this is not a fan of the Jurassic World series of films that's written this question. If we do not invest in nature, how do we maintain biodiversity and the natural wonders of the earth? Any answers to that from our wizards?
I can have a go, sure. So I think everybody keeps talking about healing, accounting, valuing for nature. But how do we do that if we don't even understand the data behind that? If we don't even understand, have the basic information to quantify, measure the value of nature in the first place? All of this is going to require technology, whether that is the use of satellite, for example, to monitor and develop accounts for seagrass, which is something that we're doing as CGI from a nature perspective, whether that is to monitor peatlands, whether that is to just generate and develop basic accounts. What are we going to use to capture that information? How are we going to report on it? How are we going to report on it at the scale that we need to? It's not just London. We're talking about the whole world. That's going to require satellite capabilities, for example. How do we reach the information that we need to reach at a fast enough pace? We're talking about 1.5 degree reduction by 2050. We are going to need to invest in blockchain technologies to help develop our ledgers. So many organizations here in this room are talking about the challenges of being able to understand our supply chain activities, for example. There's nature within the supply chain, but how do we understand all of that information down to tier 5 of your suppliers within the supply chain? If we invested in blockchain, we could develop a ledger quite easily that could provide us with the information. At the moment, we're all challenging and we're saying that blockchain is very energy intensive, but actually, could we not just invest in, for example, developing simple plugins that could develop a much more sustainable blockchain solution, which could then provide all of us with a ledger and information that we need? We're talking about how do we share information and data across complicated supply chain and complicated ecosystems? Again, all of that is going to need technology. So for us to say we need nature to heal, we need to develop the accounts, all of that has a fundamental basis of needing to understand data, needing for all of us to work together in a connected way, and all of that is going to require technology, I'm afraid.
Can I add to that? I think I think this is such a pertinent question. Obviously, I always go back to us as humans as well. You know what's going to happen when we're not longer here. But I feel like sometimes we talk about climate crisis like we have so much time to act on this. Like we have a whole lifetime. I'm impatient, right? I think a lot of us are impatient, and we don't have time to figure out whether it's going to work out or not. I mean, this is it, right? So I think that's the kind of urgency that I think we need, and the technology can support us with. With regards to the species, I think the same way that green technologies can ensure climate conditions for species to be preserved, can we imagine how those species are kept and they survive and thrive because of those technologies already, because of the new ecosystems that are preserved and created, because it's also normal for things also sometimes to change at a certain rate, for new species to be created and to evolve in some of those habitats and new ecosystems that are around what new green technologies offer around new crops, or around the how communities are supported in a way that those ecosystems and forests are preserved. But also think about it. Businesses that invest in green technologies around new material development for clothes, cars, technology, or, for example, for crop and farming, they can then reinvest some of that as well into the preservation efforts, right? So I think they can go in hand in hand. I think there's examples for sure of when green technologies can be symbiotic with natural preservation efforts. Does not have to be that technology is against nature. It doesn't have to take one from the other. They actually can work quite well together and minimize our impact, maximize opportunities for everyone, and for environmental growth and for restoration in that sense.
Can I just very quickly add to that? Sorry. So just one more point I want to
Where's the
spoon?
So, I'm going to park you for a minute, Mattie. Mathew, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, just a couple of points on that. I'm thinking, from an ecologist point of view, there's an increasing view that we should be taking a Hippocratic oath that first do no harm. And I'm hearing things here which suggesting that we can still exploit nature. In Britain, we've got this kind of loose commitment to have 30% of England primarily managed for nature by 2030. I think that's unachievable at this current rate of pace, but it's certainly an ambition. My personal desire is to see what Edward Wilson, the evolutionist who passed away a few years ago, asking for 50% of the globe to be left to nature. And we don't touch it. We leave it alone for itself because we as a human species cannot survive without that 50%. Yes, we may be able to do all those other things with the other 50%, but the 50% of the globe is left to nature to do her own thing in an amazing way. Now, maybe that's naive, but unless we take the first principle of do no harm, we're stuffed.
Right.
Could I? There's something else I'd like to come back on, because there was some comments there around the role of companies in this. And having worked in this sector for a long time, I would like to say that I genuinely believe that there were companies out there that were motivated and actually had the right legal and governance framework and the right kind of laws in the way in which they're set up and what they are required to do that would enable that to happen, and that I would feel confident that a company that is currently deforesting parts of the Amazon and going, oh my God, there's loads of biodiversity, we better record this. But now we own that information. To me, it seems a little naive right now, given the way in which we constitute what a company exists for, how investment goes into that, and how it's required to return a value back to those investors. We almost need different organizations, that if there is going to be those assets of biodiversity, that they are not held in such a way that someone can profit from that. It comes back to what Mathew was saying earlier, and I sort of picked on with my Blue Ventures, this idea that we need participation from everybody. There is an environmental justice angle to why we're talking about nature-based solutions, and it shouldn't be sitting in the hands of the large companies with huge amounts of resources who can exploit technology. When we look at the way in which renewable energy has been deployed in this country, when we started out with wind farms, there was this really emerging movement of people going, we should have some community ownership of energy, and there should be a way in which those local communities that are going to have a wind farm in their back garden should be able to derive some value and invest that in their local area. They could create a community hall, they could do whatever they want with that money, but it's theirs. Whereas at the moment it is owned by large corporations who take that money elsewhere and return it back to shareholders. So I am slightly nervous about saying that companies are going to play a role in protecting biodiversity. I mean, that was the original question. It's like, can the biodiversity issue and technology.
I'm going to wrap you up there.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no,
I'm
that's
a bit
very good. All right, no,
passionate
okay. This is great. This is fantastic. So let's take these points here. So do no harm. I think this is also about not always putting a value on nature and monetizing it. We're going to push it back over here to the technologists and probably layer in this whole concept of growth. Aren't we, when we talk about technology, some of the questions are touching on this, don't we just have a flawed notion and a flawed priority around growth? We can't keep growing because then we will violate Matthew's do no harm principle.
Can I say something first? In the work I do at Sedex, when we do like a sustainability strategy, as some of us might work in that area as well, we do always, one of the pillars is obviously people, planet, can be product, but also we always say it's economic growth, because we are realistic. The issue I have is not that, I think a lot of the issue is just not that, not with technology, I think it's with the people, right, behind it. So I think, but we have to be realistic. These are people's livelihoods as well. Business play a role. They are big agents of change, hence why I believe in work in this field. How are we going to convince them this is a good investment, right? And I guess it's not just about just refusing to work with businesses. We need to engage with business in a productive, proactive, positive way, that they see the value as for themselves. How are you going to tell a farmer, you can't use pesticides or you can't use certain things because that will be damaging for a nature-based solution? You tell that to my mom, she will lose all her crops. What's she going to do? She's going to lose her house. You can't ask people to sacrifice for things that are important to you even if they are, and they're very important for everyone, because people's basic and immediate needs are what's right in front of them. And it's not the tech billionaires. This is farmers, rural communities around the world, people who are suffering the effects of climate change. And those people won't have justice, I think, without technology that is decentralized, democratized, and that supports both life on Earth for people and for other species.
Yeah, I was going to say we're having an interesting debate within the company on Monday about growth, because obviously the current government keeps talking about growth. Consumption growth, or pure consumption growth, I think we can all accept is wrong, but it's a definition. You can grow sustainably. The circular economy doesn't define itself as no growth. It defines itself as sustainable growth. So taking a polarized view of historic growth without evolutioning that into sustainable growth, I think misinterprets the potential of growth. And growth as a society, growth in how we value things is all part of that journey of us adapting to humans to live sustainably.
And just a very quick point to add to that.
Okay, Mattie, I'll give you 30 seconds for this.
Please.
Yeah.
Embedded within the principles of sustainable growth is qualitative improvements and quantitative improvements. Those ultimately lend themselves to being able to monitor, being able to measure, being able to quantify those in a way that provides a holistic view and an approach to life, well-being, and welfare. Technology is the only way that we're able to monitor qualitative and quantitative growth at a global scale. Second point was around the precautionary principle.
It's a long 30 seconds, isn't it? So keep going. Keep going.
As part of the precautionary principle, we need to have the ability to inform decision makers when not to touch a particular natural capital aspect. And in order to inform people, we need to be able to predict, we need to be able to identify, we need to be able to inform. How can we do that when we don't have the information, the data? How could we inform decision makers? And I think we can only do that, again, going back to the development of technologies that can provide everybody with information to make the decisions that we need to make.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mattie. Right, just to sort of finish up a bit on growth. And I guess looking over here, I guess you guys will probably be called the Anti-Growth Coalition by our government. I think you should take that probably as a badge of honour. Exactly, yeah. So growth clearly is, we can't keep growing, but growth is also associated with improving living standards. Countries with higher GDP tend to correlate with higher kind of happiness. Do we not need technology in some respects to grow sustainably?
So our concept of value is fairly arbitrary. Yes, we have indexes for food and whatnot, but see how variable the price of carbon is. See how variable our luxury goods are. So much of this is a construct. So much of this is what we choose to value in the first place. In a green future where we protect and restore nature first, there are countless good green jobs, and a life where people have meaningful good work is strongly correlated to happiness. A world where we have green open space, nature, bird song, we can go for a nice walk along the river, that's happiness.
Great, I love it. That's poetic. Thank you very much for that. No surprise that it's technology on the nature side that's broken down here. Right, I'm going to keep this going for a couple more minutes. This is great. I'm not going to be able to get through all of these questions. There are lots, so thank you very much for them. I like this one, by the way. Tech versus nature. My phone is overheating and it keeps shutting down, so I took out a pencil and paper to take notes today. No problem with them. So I think
check your battery. That's what can be dangerous.
There we go. Oh, sorry, I have not turned on my microphone on. There we go. Certainly kicked me off team technology. Carbon capture and storage. You guys have mentioned that a couple of times. Isn't the basic problem with carbon capture and storage that it doesn't work? It hasn't worked at all, and it's a litany of failure.
I can go.
We can
first.
park that one if
Should
you
I
want to come back to it.
No, I
No,
can.
no,
You
no.
put a pin
we'll
in
do it.
that question.
We could have a go first. So, I think it's not that technological carbon capture and storage is a failure. It's just the fact that we've not invested in it enough to be able to capture the emissions at the accelerated pace that we need to. There's certainly a lot of evidence out there that demonstrates, as I highlighted earlier, that technological carbon capture can capture emissions at a 90% rate faster than nature. And of course, if you factor in the growth of trees, at what point they need to grow before they can capture carbon in a convenient way, there's so much to think about from a nature perspective, whereas with technology that could be done instantly, as I highlighted, from plants and industries, in addition to the fact that you can convert that CO2 to then drive further sustainable outcomes within industries that are that produce a lot of emissions. So I just think it's a lack of investment in, not I think, but actually there's a lot of evidence and data that shows that it's a lack of investment in these green technologies in the first place that are needed to actually support the natural system.
Do you want to ask a question?
Beautifully said.
Yes. You're asking a question. Right?
So when you say 90% efficiency, what do you mean? And when you say instantly, what do you mean?
Okay, well, I was reading an article by the UNFCCC and the World Economic Forum where these statistics were shared. And the scientist's perspective is that if we were to invest in technologies, they are able to actually remove emissions in the atmosphere at a rate far much quicker than planting a tree the very same day and actually monitoring the rate of capture of emissions. Trees, for example, would take 3 to 5 years to grow to a level where they can capture emissions at a rate that technology can. Technology can do it almost immediately, instantly, from the point of development and deployment. If we were to deploy it today and plant the tree the same day, actually you find that the technology could absorb more carbon. That's what we mean.
Can I respond to that?
It's a bit clunky turning on microphones on the whole time. Yes, you can.
So bioenergy carbon capture and storage is one of these carbon removal technologies, right? That is
One.
literally, one. That is literally taking biomass that has grown and would continue to be sequestering carbon, transporting it to a facility. That facility is running on energy. It's running on energy that, even if green, has embodied carbon, has resource demands in its production. And then maybe you're getting some energy out of that. Then some other technologies, say enhanced terrestrial weathering. That's one. That's promising, has some co-benefits. You're having to quarry rocks. That's an enormous carbon intensity. Then grind it down so that it can actually absorb the carbon and transport it to wherever you're going to be placing it. Again, more embodied carbon. We have not seen any of these direct air capture or bioenergy carbon capture and storage technologies get anywhere near what we need to be at because of the embodied carbon in the process of actually getting to them. Direct air capture, that's still a very unproven technology that has a lot of chemicals that can be damaging to the environment. And massive investment. Yes, we have a preference for something that we can directly quantify. We have a preference in our financial systems for these things that are easy to see right in front of our faces. But the embodied carbon of
I'm gonna give you
a
another 30
natural
seconds.
system is negligible. It's co-benefits. It's water filtration services. It's the cultural benefits. These are the things that we're getting in addition to nature-based solutions for carbon removal.
Can I respond to that?
You can do it in 20 seconds, Mattie.
Well, I think just really quickly, embodied carbon, a large aspect of embodied carbon is actually as a result of the manufacturing of these products and services that we are developing, including technologies. So if we don't invest in green technologies from an embodied carbon perspective, that includes the design of these technologies in the first place, then how do we develop solutions that are sustainable and are actually able to help us accelerate the pace of reducing emissions? So again, it takes us back to the investment needed to in novel technologies at an embodied carbon phase, i.e. manufacturing, development, and so forth.
Can I just say, I love the fact that we've got on to enhanced weathering and embodied carbon. We're going deep into the carbon hole here. This is brilliant. This is great stuff. Right, I'm going to wrap up questions. There's lots more questions. We can't get to them all. I'm going to try one thing. If anyone's brave enough to put up their hand, you can just ask a rogue question of any kind. Yes, you, sir.
Is green fintech?
Is green fintech?
Technology or nature?
Right, a question for both teams there. Anyone wants to take on that one? Is green fintech technology or nature?
Can I start? I think, well, it can be argued to be on the green technology side. Think about how, for example, for climate justice and environmental justice, how fintech or funding schemes and technologies and applications can actually help to reach some of those affected communities, some of those some projects and programs that of environmental restoration and conservation efforts that actually need support. So I would argue it plays a role there. I can't argue for the other side, obviously. That's kind of my view.
Team Nature over here. Would you like to comment?
But also, can I just add to make things also always with the aim to make processes more efficient, to minimize impact, environmental, but also negative social impact as well, and maximizing good and potential for all stakeholders involved, including environment, species,
right.
our species,
I'm
and
going to wrap it up there.
communities.
Thanks very much for that. That's brilliant. Because you're brave enough to put your hand, is there a question there?
Green fintech.
Yep.
Is tech, but it's not novel tech.
Thank you. I love that. We flagged that at the start. That's great attention to detail. That is brilliant. I like that. So we should keep focusing on the detail of the motion. We're going to be voting again quite soon. So please do just think about exactly what we're asking here and whether you're changing your mind at all. Right. We need to crack on now because we're slightly running over, but we'll get back on track. So Lola, you're the final prophet. Over to you.
Turn on this. So Earth is a complex living system of systems that we're only beginning to understand. To ensure that the planet remains habitable for future generations, we need an appreciation of the deep entanglement in our Earth's history. Civilization developed under a historically unprecedented stable climatic condition known as the Holocene. That's an 11,000-year blip in Earth's 4.2 billion year history. We are fundamentally dependent on the weather patterns and species distributions that co-evolved over billions of years. Everything from the pollination of our crops to the distribution of our rainfall patterns. To paint a picture of this interconnectedness, the Amazon is fertilized by dust from the Sahara that is made up of fossilized microalgae that grew in formerly Lake Megachad. This dust travels across the Atlantic Ocean, replenishing the phosphorus that's washed away in the Amazon by rain. It's a massive carbon sink, the Amazon, but it also produces its own rainfall. But it also produces rainfall in the US Midwest, the breadbasket of the country. And on its way, it fertilizes the ocean. It produces more phytoplankton, which provides food for the deep ocean and is a major carbon sink. This is all to say that the complexities and knock-on effects in our systems are dynamic and uncertain. We must apply the precautionary principle to protect and restore nature so that we maintain the Holocene balance. We're the first generation with the scientific capacity to begin to understand these Earth system processes and their interactions. This is a really powerful place to be, and it's a new place. We can now articulate what has been happening to our planet as a result of our collective behavior. In 2009, the Stockholm Resilience Center developed the planetary boundaries framework. This defines the limits of acceptable change within 9 of Earth's key system processes. It's effectively defining a planetary playing field of all the physical, chemical, and biological processes that humanity must operate within to avoid tipping points and catastrophic environmental change at a global scale. To date, we have passed thresholds or are operating within the space of the zone of uncertainty for 5 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. That includes climate change, but it also includes biodiversity, land system change, nutrient cycles, and freshwater cycles. While these boundaries are quantified in isolation, they're fundamentally interdependent because that's how our Earth has evolved. By focusing narrowly on carbon, we ignore the history of the Earth and its complexity and may risk destabilizing the entire system, with catastrophic implications for the climate system in particular. Climate change is one of 9 boundaries, and it's a very important one. Along with biosphere integrity, it regulates all other boundaries. But all other boundaries affect it as well, and we need to look at all 9 in unison. These systems have co-evolved, and nature is the regulator, and we have yet to understand their interdependencies. The diversity of biological organisms underpins our global resilience. That's broken down into functional diversity, which is an ecosystem's capacity to provide life-supporting functions, such as water cycling, decomposition, and soil formation. But also genetic diversity, which is the variety of genetic characteristics in a population, which contributes to an ecosystem's long-term capacity to cope with shocks and adapt to change. This is fundamental in our changing climate. That's all to say that supporting planetary health is key. We don't understand the implications of focusing narrowly. We need to let nature do what it has evolved to do in our complex systems. And that means rather than imposing our industrial systems on nature, we need to let nature shape our innovations. We need a new philosophy of design focused on systems regeneration. That means designing for nature by giving it space to flourish, reducing our extractive and polluting pressures on natural systems. And that does mean employing a circular economy and living more closely with the cycles of nature by reducing the use of composite materials and toxic materials that can't be reintegrated into our systems. It also means designing with nature. Nature has evolved to perform the functions that we seek to re-engineer. It does so at ambient pressure and temperature. This is low carbon. We can't afford the arrogance of trying to re-engineer these systems in an energy-intensive way. Nature is a catalog of products that has benefited from 3.8 billion years of research and development. And we're fundamentally part of that system. Everything that we do, everything that we breathe is part of that system. We need to abandon this dualistic view of nature and stop treating the symptoms. We need to focus on the systems of planetary health. Now, this means working more closely with the cycles of nature to protect and restore it, having nature as a stakeholder in all of our decisions and all of our designs. When we employ green tech, satellite imagery, artificial intelligence, all that, thank you for bringing that up. That is fundamental. We need to understand these natural systems because our literacy is so poor, and it's actually weakening as we live in our climate-controlled buildings and we lose touch with soil and the seasons. We're starting to see that in London with our heat waves, but we have fundamentally lost our literacy in nature. Green tech must fundamentally be framed around the protection and restoration of nature to ensure the stability of our Earth system processes that we don't yet understand. And we need to ensure that this Earth is a safe operating space for future generations. We need science-based targets that reflect the limits in our system processes, and our policy and economy must be oriented around this. We have no other choice. There has been an immense asymmetry in the research and funding going toward technology-based climate solutions versus simply trying to understand what nature has already evolved to perform. We need to dedicate resources to fundamentally understanding our dependence on healthy natural systems and the functions that they perform so that we can accelerate them where needed to get ourselves back within the safe operating space of our planetary systems.
I think that's a fantastic way to wrap up the profits arguments there. So thank you very much for that, Lola. That was a great description of, I guess, yeah, the world as a whole in time and in history, and the whole interdependent nature of it as a system. So thank you for that. I do feel that my gavel is not commanding complete attention here. And I'm sort of wondering, maybe we need a bigger gavel next time. I sort of don't quite feel it's got the solidity to it that it needs. Right, we're on to our last speaker now. So Stuart, you are wrapping things up for the Wizard side.
I am. Thank you very much. Values. We all have individual values. We all have different values. We perceive that some people have good values and other people have bad values, but that's our perceptions. Society has judgments on values. We have good people, we have good organizations. We have bad people and bad organizations. Those 2 points are not in judgment here today. We can all do something good and we can all do something bad, but that's not the proposition in front of you. There's no question that our opposition have proven that nature is brilliant. Nature is absolutely the leader in evolution. It's proven it. It's got a track record. They've proven nature is beautiful. It's complex. I use words given to us by our opposition. We're yet but scratching the surface of our knowledge of this wonderful, beautiful thing. We are still learning how the systems work. And yet, we continue to burn carbon. We continue to denude nature. So are we giving nature the time to evolve? Because if we don't give nature the time to evolve, what does it do? Well, nature in crisis is brutal. It's brutal for all the species, including our own. And there's many examples of where nature is reacting to the consequences of our consumption habits as a species, which are brutal. They involve deaths, pestilence, loss of biodiversity through floods, through deserts, through lack of rainfall. There's no question that we have to act. There's no question that we have to act to give nature back control of our world. And I think my colleagues on the other side have proven that nature and our understanding of nature is also novel. It's still emerging as a knowledge. And there's many examples around the world of people trying to be good, to introduce new species to cope with other species or to solve problems. Rabbits in Australia, for example, where people thought they were doing good. And they weren't. Nature-based solution. Get rid of one solution, creates another problem. So there's no question that a nature-based solution remedy or a technical-based solution remedy will have mistakes. How many times have we got lost on a journey and learned from that to take a map or program the GPS better? There's no question that both sides have to learn. The key question is, how do we do this transition? How do we get the world into a position where we can give it back to nature and nature continue to take control of evolution? There's no question that nature stores, husbands. It keeps our world as we wish it to be, but we need to give it a chance. And that transition for the 7 billion people in this world has to be socially equitable. So we have to give more resources to some parts of the world, and we have to give up some resources in other parts of the world. We know we have to cut our consumption in this country by nearly 3 times to live sustainably. And I'm sure in this room there's people willing to do that because they have different values to others. But I can tell you that the 68 million people out there will have slightly different views. Some will give, some will not give, some will are less in a position to give. So we need tech to give us time. We need tech to speed up the journey, to be quick, to deliver quickly, to give time to nature to take that evolutionary step, to avoid nature being brutal by revolutionizing. Because revolutionizing in nature's terms is truly brutal. So yes, tech can be quick. Tech is not perfect. Nothing is. Nature-based solutions will not be perfect. Do no harm is neither nature nor technology. It's a value. So if we do technology, there is no question that we should do technology understanding, do no harm. The only question is, what do we need to do now? What do we need to do in the future? And there's no question that investment is not binary. The proposition doesn't say that there is no investment for one side or the other. It says, where do we need to spend our money, or most of our money, that we have available to deliver the quickest position? And I think we've proven that technology is the thing that will give us the time as a species to give nature the time to take control under evolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. I think you could hear a pin drop during that one. That was fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Right. Okay. Well, that concludes our the various speeches, propositions. So we're going to go back now for, this is very exciting, our final audience vote. So if you'd like to start voting, please. And do try to think about the specific nature of the proposition.
No pun intended.
Right, just give it another 30 seconds or so. Just before I announce the winner with great fanfare, what we'll do after this is we'll just give you guys all a chance to reflect, to take off your wizard hats and your prophet sandals or whatever you're wearing, and be yourselves, and just any kind of reflections on what you think might be a conclusion from this discussion. That would be brilliant. It's definitely tighter, I have to say, at the minute. It's a bit of a nail biter, and I think we will. I think we'll wrap it up. So, the final score. I'm just trying to remember what we had to start with. Was it
59 and 41?
59 and 41. Thank you, Stuart. So, the Team Tech have reined it in. It's just moved again. Any last minute votes? Yes. Hang on. What's going on here? Right. I've now lost the poll. I have got a figure there, Alexandra, in mind. Is that the kind of final
It
figure?
shows how unreliable tech is.
Oh, there we go.
It's the user. It's the user.
Cheap shot. Text buying user.
Would you prefer like a show of hands or something like that? Would that be better? It's still moving. This is hang on. Is there anyone else? Is there anyone who hasn't voted who wants to vote? Right. 3, 2, 1. I'm going to call it. It's ended up pretty tight, actually. Nature-based solutions are the winner. Ooh, it's moved again.
It was tech before.
Is there anyone else who hasn't voted? Okay, they are still the winner, 53%, and green technology are on 47%, down to 46. Sorry, guys.
Take the first offer.
Yeah. So I would say congratulations. Well done, Team Technology there. Well done, Wizards. You reined it in. That's brilliant. So some great arguments there. And congratulations to Team Nature for coming out on top. Quick round of applause, please, for the team. Right. Would you like, so just turning to you guys first, any reflections you'd like to give on the discussion today?
I'll start if you want. I'm going to go outwards as I was last. To me personally, we need everything. There's nothing off the agenda. In any crisis, there's nothing off the agenda. So nature-based is just as important as tech. We just got to pick the right tool for the job. Sometimes it'll be nature with the right tool. Sometimes it'll be tech the right tool. We shouldn't be sitting there polarizing between the two.
I guess I would add, I think they brought such incredible points and I learned a lot. So it's a humbling experience for me as well. But climate change and climate action are so interconnected with action on human rights and fighting for the preservation of communities and their dignity, the right to decent work, the right to live safe and environments and preserve their own culture as well, as has happened to where I come from as well. So those two are connected, and I think we should always remember how, when considering holistic approaches, how we are including both and how the unintended consequences or impacts of certain solutions, whatever it is, more or low, high or low tech, that they can bring on both sides. So
I think for me, probably a very hard debate because my area of expertise for my PhD is nature. So I'm just hoping that there weren't any telltale signs in my debate. And also being the head of sustainability for DEFRA, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. So a very hard debate for me. And actually, I think it just demonstrates what we need to achieve that 1.5 by 2050, that actually there is just no one solution that can achieve it on its own, whether that is nature, whether that is technology, whether that is supply chain, embodied carbon. I think we do need to look at it within the context of the whole wider ecosystem in order to really achieve the reductions that we need to. So I just thought I would mention that actually I struggled a bit because of my background in nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Any reflections from you guys?
Still figuring this out. I'm regardless team nature, but also agree that we need to apply every solution that we have at once. We can't be choosing sides. My fear is that we have, or our markets have, a preference for easily quantifiable technology systems. And our natural systems are complex and interdependent and have myriad benefits, not just that one, like say, trying to construct a concrete flood defense versus trying to restore the entire catchment. There is variability in nature. It's not easily quantifiable, but also we haven't been investing in trying to better understand it. And again, there's so much that we don't understand. You know, that fungi can break down all hydrocarbons, but are we applying that yet to manage our waste? You know, there are so many technologies that nature has already evolved that we haven't begun to try to understand because they don't fit neatly within our financial systems and in our political systems. And even in science, if it doesn't fit closely into a law or a test tube, we devalue it. And so we need a fundamental shift in the way that we understand variability and complexity, and that will take technology to start to understand that. But it has to fundamentally be nature-led and focused on the tipping points within our systems.
Lola said it far better than I ever could, so I kind of concur with what she said. I suppose a couple of other things is that, yeah, we do need technology. And, you know, even nature conservation, which is what I do, involves technology. We can't do it without it. But what I am still very nervous about is that we are a curious ape and we cannot stop fiddling. We cannot stop interfering because we are kind of genetically programmed, for want of a better word, to do that. So it's going to be really difficult, I think, to not only respect those planetary boundaries, but also keep our hands off some of nature to do its own thing without us basically interfering with it. You know, we are vulnerably climatically because we have been interfering for millennia, and it's going to be really difficult to stop doing that. I hope that we can use our inventive intelligence to create technologies that do no harm to nature, but I'm still not convinced that we have a societal system that allows us to do that. And I think the other thing, and it was a point that was one of the questions about, you know, designing new species to reintroduce. If we get into that stage, we've lost the argument. We shouldn't be trying to invent new species. We should be allowing nature the space and time to do her own thing. And we step back. And that has some very fundamental implications for us as a society. I'll leave it there.
It's been a really fascinating debate, and I've learned huge amounts. It's actually been a real privilege to take part. And I think it's actually created probably a better level of debate by forcing us into these sort of extreme positions, which may be quite radically different to where we would want to find ourselves. And I think it's allowed us to explore and understand a lot more, which I think as a species, we sometimes find ourselves very set in our ways, and we almost dig in deeper, and we don't want to hear something different. We only want to hear what confirms our own biases. So in a way, sort of what it leaves me thinking is, and you talked about it, it's values. It's like this, we've lost that ability to be in touch with the values and our understanding of where we sit and that we are part of nature. And I think we almost need to try to look at how do we start to really build that right back into everything in the way that our education system works, the way that we set up our companies, what they're asked to do, the way in which we inform our decisions about technology, the moral framework within which we operate is so far behind where things are happening, that whether that's with social media and the kind of the way in which algorithms decide what you get shown, or whether it's in terms of someone can create something, but just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And I think we've lost sight of some of those really fundamental operating system principles that we sort of need that will govern us. Because as you said, you know, as Lola, I've learned so much from Lola, and Lola's sort of saying that the ability for nature to provide us with an amazing natural technological solution, that if we learn to really leverage that and use that as inspiration, we actually probably would come up with a better solution than for us to try to do it alone. So I think we need to put a bit of our ego and our arrogance to one side, reframe and look at our values. And it will be really difficult to do this, but I think it will be, if we don't, I think we'll keep finding we've put ourselves into a corner because of some of the technological things that we will have created just because we can. So I was always very much in camp nature. I'm absolutely still in the nature thing. And I think technology for me, you know, use your phrase, is it serving nature? Is it helping us? Because if it isn't, then we perhaps need to find a better way to just pause and try to understand the impact. Otherwise, I think 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, we will be still sat up here. I'll have a lot grayer hair and we'll be having the same debate. And that's not the future I want for my kids. And I'm pretty sure everyone around here doesn't want that future either.
So I actually felt quite loath to use the gavel, I have to say, to be honest, because I really didn't like stopping people talking about things they're so clearly passionate about. So thank you very much for that. I know we would always say this after a discussion like this, but this really has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you for making the effort to argue the sides as well. I know in some cases that took a little bit of kind of, it was slightly challenging maybe to do that, but I do think that made it a great discussion. I think it's a really interesting motion when you look at the kind of specifics of it. I think sort of probably where I was looking at it was I did vote for for nature because
Biased.
it's biased. I know exactly. It's like FIFA. It's corrupt, isn't it? Because the motion was that nature must be prioritised over the development of novel technology. So for me, novel was a sort of key word there because I slightly fall down on the side that we do. I think we have most of the technologies we need already. It's just about scaling them up, but that's not entirely true. We need new technologies for things like green steel, etc. I think we all know kind of where the conclusion really is in terms of the two kind of working together. If we think about how technology works best, it clearly works best in conjunction with our rapidly growing understanding of the extraordinary nature of nature and everything we're learning about that. We just think about where the energy system is going now. We're going to an energy system that is wrapped around the weather, and we're basically moving the sun and the wind and the energy from it to supply all the energy we need. That's far better technology than just burning fossilized stuff. So technology and nature, I think, you obviously go more kind of hand in hand in that respect. So that was, I think, the sort of generally the conclusion we were clearly going to drift to, but it was good to have the debate. So I would just ask everyone to say thank you through another round of applause to our speakers today. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to echo the thanks. Mattie, Francisca, Stuart, Lola, Mathew, Claire, that was fantastic. Really everything we hoped for out of this session. Sterling work. Dan, this is definitely a bit of herding cats from a moderator's perspective, and that was brilliant. So can't thank you enough. So much gold. I hope some of you out there with quicker fingers were tweeting up a storm, because there's so much good stuff that came out of this that really resonated all the way through. And Stuart, you sort of said, we shouldn't be forcing a choice here, and of course we always expect it to end up in the middle. And but what we really love about this format is so often in a traditional sort of panel discussions, you get 6 people up here violently agreeing from the middle. and what we wanted to achieve with this is to get out to the extremes and cover the whole spectrum of the debate around this stuff, even if it's not an honest debate or a debate that's really necessarily happening in real life. We got at issue areas that I think we probably wouldn't have done in a more traditional format. And of course, it was a lot more fun as well. And so really can't thank you enough again for your good humor and for making it so entertaining for us. A brilliant culmination for us of the 2 days of our Climate Action Summit. The whole point of the summit was to try and kind of like NASA's recent experiment with the meteor, just to bump this asteroid off course just a little bit. And the asteroid I'm talking about is a singular focus on carbon that is too much dominating conversations about climate. And of course, we discussed this, the fact that it's relatively easier to quantify has made it a magnet for attention, particularly for investors, giving them a hard, real number that they can work from. Our objective from the summit yesterday, our focus was on circularity. Today, our focus was on nature-based solutions. Both offer a more holistic approach for business to have a positive impact on the climate. And of course, it goes much further than that. And our perspective is that climate action really needs to be looked upon as goal 13. You know what I'm talking about there. It's Sustainable Development Goals. It's goal 13. Climate action needs to sit within a holistic agenda. It's the only way we're going to get a just transition that takes care of people and planet in the full sense of everything that encompasses. And so nature-based solutions, probably the best way to start guaranteeing just transition. And circularity, the way we're going to have businesses that are fit for the future. And so our intention with the 2 days of programming that we've just completed was to really send out a wake-up call to business. A lot of the conversation was around assess your impact on nature. If you haven't done so already, understand what it is, and then start looking at how you can have a more positive impact there. And the same on circularity. You need to understand where does your business sit now in terms of circularity. And anyone with a business that, if you think it's impossible to make your business circular, probably impossible for your business to survive in 20 years. And so now is the time to start really rethinking business models and taking that on board. And so we certainly hope, we've been really thrilled with the level of engagement we've had over the last 2 days across these subjects. And we're certainly really excited about that. We're going to be rewriting some of our programming plans for 2023 to reflect the interest and some of the great ideas that have emerged from these last couple of days. I only started jotting down notes a little bit late, and one of them was whale poo. So I have to be careful to stay on track. No, this speaks, because I thought some of the points that Stuart made were quite compelling around using technology to accelerate it. We had, in the previous session to this, someone was talking about whales and the profound impact that whales have on climate. And many of you probably seen, of course, I'm too tired to remember his name now, but he's an eminent speaker in the climate space, and he's been doing some work on synthetic whale poo as a way to stimulate plankton growth and to stimulate the regeneration of whale populations. And it speaks to that point that there really is an important role that technology can maybe play. I would normally be really nervous about anything that smacks of geoengineering, but this seems like a really interesting and innovative idea, if it's managed properly, that could give nature the necessary boost it needs, get us back to a place where nature can fulfill what it's naturally. Okay, I'm gonna stop my rant. I think I've said enough. Thank you very much to Foresight Group for hosting us today and allowing us to enjoy the view and the spectacular facilities that they have. It's been a great pleasure to be here. Thank you all very much. Those of you in the room for coming in such numbers. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking these days. We get sort of accustomed to having 70% of the people that register for things not turning up online. And we're so glad that you all have joined us tonight. And to those of you online, we're also very appreciative of your participation in this session. We don't have a lot of experience at hybrid events, but I'm hoping that this can be a model for future engagements like this. Huge thank you to the team, especially Ali. Fantastic job with the whole summit all the way through. But of course, it was not just Ali. Where is the team? Where is everybody? Rob, Jess, they're all in the other room watching. Okay, well, we don't have a video monitor there. So the team have been fantastic. This has been many months in the making, and couldn't be more happy with how it all turned out. Is the participant engagement team in this room? Because I thought that was going to be part of our plan. It's just see you, eh? They're all in the other room. Oh no, and there's Ollie. But I was going to get the team to wave so that if anybody had questions about Global Compact, you'd know who to ask. Now it's looking like it's down to me and Ali. So if you want to talk about and then now 2 final bits of housekeeping. Like I said at the start, please stick around and join us for a drink. That would be really great. We can rehash the debate. If you do have to leave us, please remember to hand in your visitor pass on the way out. If you're staying with us, probably even more important, maybe write something on your hand after a few drinks that you still remember to hand in your visitor pass. Thanks again for coming. Thank you all very, very much, and have a great evening.
Thank you.